So, welcome everyone. Today we will discuss systemic sclerosis. This is a autoimmune condition with a female preponderance and with a prevalence of 10 to 20 cases per 100,000 population. Unfortunately, though the prevalence is low, the outcome is bad actually, because after diagnosis the 5-year survival is only 70% patient. So after diagnosis 30% patient will die within next 5 years. Considering the prevalence and severity of the disease, we will have an overview of this condition. Actually, we will try to have a glimpse of the disease, actually glimpses in fact, to have an understanding of the disease, to go through all the details. I don't think it's necessary for this lecture. The purpose of this lecture to have an understanding of the disease, what are its clinical features, what investigations, and what treatments are available. So again, we are going to divide this lecture. In this lecture, we will divide it in two parts. In first part, we will discuss about the clinical features and investigations and diagnosis. In the second part, we will discuss something about the treatment of systemic sclerosis. First of all, the systemic sclerosis, the clinical manifestations is divided in broad spectrum. It is divided in two groups: diffuse cutaneous systemic sclerosis and limited cutaneous systemic sclerosis. In diffuse cutaneous systemic sclerosis, the whole body can be involved. On the other hand, in limited cutaneous systemic sclerosis, the involvement is up to elbow or up to knee. So, in systemic sclerosis, there is actually a widespread fibrosis took place. This fibrosis occurs in the skin, in the vasculature, in the internal organ. So this widespread fibrosis can occur almost anywhere in the body. In case of diffuse cutaneous systemic sclerosis, the skin involvement might happen to the whole body. On the other hand, if it is limited, it is up to elbow or up to knee. So what are the other clinical characteristics? So these are Raynaud's phenomenon, digital ischemia, sclerodactyly, and internal organ involvement like cardiac, lung, gut, renal disease. So if we want to know a single clinical characteristics of systemic sclerosis, if we want to know at least one clinical characteristics, we have to know something about Raynaud's phenomenon, because Raynaud's phenomenon is universal in systemic sclerosis. So a patient who is having Raynaud's phenomenon, we have to have in mind that this patient might have systemic sclerosis. Another important thing, the appearance of Raynaud's phenomenon might precede many years before the development of other clinical features. So this has to be keep in mind. So before we go further, let us discuss something about Raynaud's phenomenon. I think from this lecture I will emphasize on this Raynaud's phenomenon very much, because understanding Raynaud's phenomenon, and this Raynaud's phenomenon is again two types, primary and secondary. We will discuss shortly about this. So what is Raynaud's phenomenon? Raynaud's phenomenon is the exaggerated vascular response to cold temperature or emotional stress. What is this? We know that when we are exposed to cold environment, this is normal hemostasis, the peripheral blood vessels constrict and restrict the blood flow to the extremities. On the other hand, if this phenomenon is exaggerated, increased, then we call it a Raynaud's phenomenon. So how will we diagnose? We will have to ask the question, how will we diagnose? There are some clinical features like sudden onset of cold fingers, sharply demarcated skin pallor, cyanotic skin, subsequently blushes upon recovery. So, what are the phases? If patient feels some kind of discomfort or unusual sensitivity in the fingers and toes, then there is a skin pallor. Suddenly the skin become white, then become cyanotic blue, then become erythematous or red. So why this happens? First of all, why white? Because the blood supply is compromised. Why blue? Because of the cyanosis. And why red? Because the blood supply is regained. Now we have to know something about this, that what is primary Raynaud's phenomenon, what is secondary Raynaud's phenomenon. I am not going to detail about this, but there are some characteristics features which might tell us that this patient is suffering from primary Raynaud's. Like what? If the appearance occurs before the age of 20 years, symmetrical manifestations of symptoms, mild to moderate severity, no association with digital ulceration or tissue gangrene, normal nail-fold capillary examination, negative antinuclear antibody titer. So, all these things, if all these things are present, then we might call it a primary Raynaud's. Like what? Earlier age of onset, less than 20 years. There is no tissue destruction, there is no infarction or ulceration or gangrene of the fingers and toes or any other tissues. And severity is not that much severe. So, and when we investigate, ANA is negative. If all these features are present, so if a patient present to us with asymmetrical Raynaud's, asymmetric Raynaud's, so say one finger is involved or one finger is one hand and another one finger in the so if a patient present to us with asymmetric presentation, say two fingers in the right hand and one fingers in the left hand, it might be secondary Raynaud's. So differentiating this primary and secondary is very important, because if the patient is suffering from primary Raynaud's, the consequent might be very good. On the other hand, if the patient is having secondary Raynaud's, even though there is no other clinical features, the patient might have very severe consequences in the futures. So, how will we approach to a patient with Raynaud's phenomenon? There are very long theoretical line in it, but what I wanted to say, first ask 3 questions to the patient. First, are your fingers unusually sensitive to colds? One question. Second question, do your finger change colors when exposed to cold? Do they turn white, blue, or both? So, are your fingers sensitive to cold? Do they change color? Do they turn white, blue, red? This color change, this color, or both? If 2 and 3 is negative, Raynaud's phenomenon is excluded. If 2 and 3 is positive, then the Raynaud's phenomenon, 2 or 1 has to be present, otherwise we cannot ask 2 or 3 question. So if 1 is present, then we have to have asked the next 2 questions. If one of the question is yes, then the diagnosis is Raynaud's phenomenon. If 2 and 3 is negative, then Raynaud's phenomenon is excluded. Later on, we have to go on many things, like is there any aggravating factors? There are many aggravating factors. If we want to remember, like keep in mind just 2 things, like what is the occupation of the patient, or what is the occupation of the patient, because if the patient use vibrating tools, that might cause this Raynaud's phenomenon. If there is repeated exposure to colds, if there is any family history, if the patient is taking contraceptive pill, that might aggravate the condition. If the patient is on beta blocker due to any reason, that might also cause Raynaud's phenomenon. So these are in the histories, where these histories has to be asked to the patient. Then clinically there is no other way. Then we have to consider some grave conditions like what our today's lecture, scleroderma, systemic lupus erythematosus, mixed connective tissue disease, dermatomyositis, polymyositis, Sjogren's syndrome, vasculitis, antiphospholipid syndrome, undifferentiated connective tissue disease. So all those diseases have different kind of manifestations, with a common thing that Raynaud's phenomenon might be present. For systemic sclerosis, it's almost universal. There has to be a Raynaud's phenomenon. For other conditions, it's not universal, but might be present. So we have to see we have to evaluate all the clinical conditions and then investigate accordingly. So this is about a little bit understanding about Raynaud's. So in the previous section we have discussed what is Raynaud's phenomenon, how can we diagnose Raynaud's phenomenon, how can we differentiate primary and secondary Raynaud's, and if there is secondary Raynaud's phenomenon, what are the diseases we have to keep in mind. There are these are actually connective tissue diseases. There are other conditions also. Maybe atherosclerosis, maybe thyroid disorder. So we cannot go on to on that track. So what are other clinical manifestations of systemic sclerosis? There might be musculoskeletal manifestations, arthralgia, flexor tenosynovitis, restricted movement of the hands due to skin. We have already said that the scleroderma affect the skin and along with the internal organs. So there will be some clinical manifestations in the internal organs too, like gastrointestinal tract, renal, lungs, cardiac manifestations also. So in gastrointestinal tract, there is smooth muscle atrophy and fibrosis of the lower 2/3 of the esophagus, leads to reflux with erosive esophagitis. So this is what happens there. There is smooth muscle atrophy in the lower 2/3 of the esophagus, and the patient might present it to us with what symptoms? With like heartburn due to esophagitis. Dysphagia or adenosphagia may also occur due to involvement of the stomach. There might be early satiety, might be gastric outlet obstruction. Involvement of the small intestine might lead to malabsorption. So the manifestations might be nausea, vomiting, abdominal discomfort, distension, and often worse after food. So these might be the gastrointestinal manifestations. What are the oral manifestations? There is, as with all other part of the body, the skin is tightened. Skin become thick, non-pitting edema is there, and movement of the hands and feet might be restricted due to skin thickening. These kind of manifestations may also in the face, like perioral skin tightening, decreased oral apparatus, furrowing around the lips, and dry membranes. What happened? The simple thing is that the patient, it become difficult for the patient to open his or her mouth due to skin tightening. There might affect the gum. It might also affect the gum and cause loosening of the teeth. There might be also telangiectasia. If we go the investigations, there is a important terms which is known as watermelon stomach, which we can see in if we do endoscopy of the patient. So what happens to, what is the pulmonary involvement? We will no go to the details because the variation, because in the diffuse disease and limited disease the manifestations is different. But in pulmonary involvement there is DPLD, diffuse parenchymal lung disease, and there is also pulmonary hypertension. Both these conditions can appear in systemic sclerosis. So, when we see the pulmonary hypertension and diffuse parenchymal lung disease, there are a different approach to both these conditions. What we have to keep in mind that there are some cardinal clinical features for this. What are these? First of all, cough, then non-productive cough, then exertional dyspnea, and progressively exertional dyspnea. If these 2 or 3 things are present, then we might think that the patient is developing or have diffuse parenchymal lung disease. What are the features? A simple non-productive cough and progressively increasing exertional dyspnea. And if you want to add and clinical findings, bibasal crepitations, bibasal end inspiratory crepitations maybe. So, these 3 things if combined, we might say the patient is having diffuse parenchymal lung disease, whatever is the cause. So, in systemic sclerosis that might also be present. So, what are the features of pulmonary hypertension? Again, there might be cough, there might be basal crepitations. So, what are the renal manifestations? In case of renal manifestations, there is a accelerated phase of hypertension maybe and renal failure, and there might be some renal involvement. So, if we think all those things, our manifestations typically affects the systemic sclerosis, typically affects the skin, and there might be other internal organ involvement. So, if we go for investigations, we cannot say that these are the investigations has to be done. It will be actually depends on the patient's manifestations of the disease. So, routine hematology, renal, liver, bone function test, urine analysis, anti-nuclear antibody, anti-topoisomerase 1 antibody, anti-centromere antibodies. These antibodies, ANA is about 70% times this is positive in scleroderma. Anti-topoisomerase 1 is positive in 30% cases of diffuse disease, and anti-centromere antibody is 60% cases of localized disease. So, even if we go for antibody testing, that might not help us to diagnose a case of systemic sclerosis. And if we want to see the systemic involvements, we might do chest X-ray, echocardiography, lung function test, high resolution lung CT, right heart catheter measurements, barium swallow X-ray, and hydrogen breath test, and there might be other investigations also. So, if we see, there is actually no definitive test to do and say this patient, this test is positive, this patient is having systemic sclerosis. So, how can we diagnose a case of systemic sclerosis or scleroderma? There are few criteria actually. There are we will discuss 3 criteria here. First of all, ACR criteria, then CREST criteria, then minor criteria. So, what are the ACR criteria? ACR criteria, there are 4 points in ACR criteria: A, B, C, D. In those 4 criteria, A must be present to have a patient, to diagnose a patient with or classify a patient with systemic sclerosis. A has to be present. Then B, C, D, among these 3, at least 2 has to be present. So, what is A? Proximal systemic sclerosis. Now, what is the definition of proximal systemic sclerosis? Proximal sclerosis, in fact. Then, what is the definition? Proximal to the MCPs and MTPs. So, when the skin thickening and skin tightness or skin edema taken place, this has to go beyond or above the metacarpophalangeal joints or metatarsophalangeal joints. This must be present. So, proximal sclerosis. Then there are three other criteria. What are those? Digital pitting, sclerodactyly, pulmonary fibrosis. Among these three things, two has to be present. So, this is ACR criteria. There is another criteria, CREST criteria. CREST criteria have 5 points. 3 has to be present to diagnose CREST syndrome. So, what are these criteria? CREST, C-R-E-S-T. This is the mnemonic for the 5 points. What are these? Calcinosis, Raynaud's phenomenon, esophageal dysmotility, sclerodactyly, telangiectasia. C. Calcinosis, R. Raynaud's phenomenon, E. Esophageal dysmotility, S. Sclerodactyly, T. telangiectasia. And what are the minor criteria? So, for CREST criteria, among these 5 clinical features, 3 has to be present. And there is a minor criteria. For minor criteria, 3 minor criteria and all 3 has to be present. What are the 3 criteria? 3 points, 3 parameters: definite Raynaud's phenomenon, abnormal capillary loops, specific scleroderma antibody. So, if these 3 present, we might also call the patient is having scleroderma. So, this is a way of diagnosis scleroderma, and in some settings we might not even be able to establish using these criteria, but depending on the clinical scenarios and other findings. The purpose of this, let us have an overview what we have discussed already. Scleroderma is an autoimmune disease. It occurs in the 4th and 5th decades. It started its clinical manifestations. Raynaud's phenomenon is a very important feature, might present in patients many years before the onset of other symptoms. This is a comparatively rare condition. 10 to 20, prevalence is 10 to 20 in 100,000 populations. Though this is a rare condition, but it is a grave condition. 70% patients survive after 5 years of diagnosis. So, what is Raynaud's condition? This is an exaggerated response to cold and emotion. So, what are the questions we need to ask to understand whether the patient is having Raynaud's or not? 3 questions. Are your fingers unusually sensitive to cold exposure? If yes, then next 2 questions. Do they change color? If yes, what are the colors? Red, white, blue, what? So, from these questions we can understand whether the patient is having Raynaud's phenomenon or not. If Raynaud's phenomenon, we have to differentiate from primary from secondary. If younger age, symmetrical presentation, no digital ischemia, we might say the patient is having primary Raynaud's. If not, asymmetrical presentation, tissue damage, we might call the patient is having secondary Raynaud's phenomenon. Why Raynaud's is so important? Because Raynaud's is at many times Raynaud's is associated with many severe conditions. If primary Raynaud's it does not have that much significance, is secondary Raynaud's, it might be associated with other conditions. And then finally, if we see we think the internal organ involvement, gastrointestinal tract, renal tract, and pulmonary and lung involvement. So, what is the renal manifestations? Renal failure and accelerated hypertension. In gastrointestinal tract, what might be the manifestations? If we go from the mouth, say there is restricted movement of the mouth, face might be thin, there might be dysmotility, esophageal dysmotility, difficulty in swallowing, odynophagia, early satiety, there might be features of malabsorption. So, these are the features for gastrointestinal tract. And what are the manifestations in pulmonary involvement? This is very simple: non-productive cough, progressive exertional dyspnea, and might be basal crepitations. So these are the why these manifestations occur, because there is diffuse parenchymal lung disease or pulmonary hypertension. For each conditions, for skin manifestations, how can we assess the severity? There is a scale known as Rodnan skin score. I am not going to going in details about this. If we have gastrointestinal condition, lung condition, renal condition, we have to assess the organ systems in different investigations. And finally, there are approaches to diagnose scleroderma. There are various criteria like ACR criteria, CREST criteria, and minor criteria. For CREST criteria, there are 4 points. A has to be present. From B, C, D, at least 2 has to be present. What is A? Proximal sclerosis, that means proximal to the metacarpophalangeal joints and metatarsophalangeal joints. Digital speed, clerodactyly, pulmonary fibrosis. Out of these 3, at least 2 has to be present. For CREST criteria, this is a mnemonic: C for calcinosis, R for Raynaud's phenomenon, E for esophageal dysmotility, S for sclerodactyly, and T for telangiectasias. Out of these 5, 3 has to be present. For minor criteria, there are 3 criteria, all has to be present: definite Raynaud's phenomenon, abnormal capillary loops, and specific scleroderma antibodies. So I think we are having an overview of the systemic sclerosis, how to suspect having a patient with systemic sclerosis, how to evaluate, and how to investigate, and how to diagnose. In the next part of the lecture, we will discuss how to treat the patient. Okay, thank you very much.